Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Believe it or not, the reason I want this not only recorded, but a quick duplicate is for other people. Like when we have our Tuesday meeting, I can pass out this lecture today because this is a kind of a keynote address, and it's also going to cover a lot of ground. As I go on, about halfway, you will get the idea of why I passed out and why I'm mentioning certain things. If you notice, the lecture that I hand out at the top, it says 5381. This is right, okay. So it mentions, that has the date on it and the discussion. First of all, cast out all negativity, and the goal is to be alert and tuned up and in time. And remember that you're glad to be here. We're talking to the people that you're glad to be here. And the subject that on that day was potential. And potential is something that's powerful, something that's potent. So it has power, it has potency, but it hadn't became yet. Potential means it's something that has the potential to be certain things. And remember, we're talking we're mainly talking at black youth at that time and other black people that and so this is the discussion. A little while down the way, it talks about every environment, every age produces needs or desires. Nature has the means to satisfy hunger, sex, sleep, and what have you. And so society should develop institutions to answer the needs of the individual and the community, the nation and the world. Then I go into manifest destiny, the way the U.S. had come up in the 1830s, say around 1839, about a global picture, a picture of the United States. And that was called Manifest Destiny. In other words, it was the destiny, as they said, of Anglo-Saxon, white people, to spread all over that continent at that time. Now you got to remember, they had already bought the Louisiana Purchase in 1803 from France. And so they was already all the way over to the Pacific, but not the southern part of the U.S., southwestern part, because they had came all up and they was the part France controlled was all the way over to the Pacific coast up in Oregon and what have you, right? And they used to have a thing about with Canada, 54-40 a fight. The border between, I don't know if you remember it in history, but it was 54-40 a fight. That meant that was the longitude ladder, whatever it was, the line up there with Canada. And they were saying, we're going to have 54-40 a fight. In other words, if you don't, this is all in the history books. We do this or we're going to fight. So this is a lecture that we gave, and it talked about manifest destiny. Manifest destiny meant that we should be a two-ocean power. And they did everything that they needed at that time to produce it. Like the Indians were in the way, And the Indians lived off the buffalo. They used the buffalo as his house. Buffalo was his food. Buffalo, it was 6 million buffalo on the plains. Man, can you imagine? They had mobility. They had freedom. Okay, so they sent trains out to do what? To slaughter the buffalo. They changed the style back east to buffalo robes, and even in Europe, buffalo everything. So they killed the buffalo and that way they killed the mobility of Native Americans, And now they had to voluntarily go on reservations or forced on reservations just to have food. When they got on the reservation, they gave them blankets with smallpox. They done them in. And they gave them that cough syrup, with opium in it. Man, they worked on it. I don't want to talk about cruelty today because we got a different subject. So they pushed everything aside to develop their destiny. All the books, all the magazines, the glorification of the West. If you were younger, what you could probably tell on TV and old movies that the West was a big deal. It just stopped. In the 1960s, they slowed down on Western movies. But when I grew up, at least 80%, 70, 80% of the movies was about the West. Yeah, they was any old stuff you see back in those days, it's all the West. So you could tell they glorified in books, magazines, they glorified the West. Why? Because there ain't nobody out here and go west, young man. That's what it said. Go west, young man. All right. So, but you can see up here, we're talking about potential and what have you. And then it says on page number 2, science says, and I have a little note, biology. Science says any living organism must either adopt or change its environment in order to survive. So like right now, this is important right now because you could see not long ago we had a climate summit, this flyer right here, we had a climate summit right here, okay? And it didn't matter the amount of people that came because we wanted to have a history. A lot of the programs we do are for history. Just the flyer and 2 people come, that's fine. But that we made a certain statement. So it says, science says that any living organism must either adopt or change its environment in order to survive. Now, in those days, we were moving into a climate change era, but this is 1981. The Earth was still, it was there, and there was, people wasn't that paranoid. The Earth still operated like it, close to what it was created to do by Allah. Allah gave us a balanced product, al-mizan. This thing is a living organism. So, but it says we are responsible for our own evolution, not Washington, Chicago, Africa. We have to cut the cord. That means this is when Negroes was just getting into, not welfare, but that will, instead of depending on ourselves and change the world, we'll depend on Washington to change it. Like voting and all that, we're saying, hell no. We are responsible for our own evolution. The other thing is, as we go along, you'll see that we didn't just arrive here last week. with evolution, with climate change, and all the stuff we talk about now, we didn't just get here. That's why I wanted to go over this. So we have to study the best examples. If you want to study how fast a man can run, study the best examples, the records. What it says, man, he can run the such and such. Now is so much speed. How tall you can get, you'd have to study Watusis. I wonder if they have any more Watusis. In Rwanda, they were, I don't hear much about them. I think they might have got wiped out with this stuff. You don't hear. Well, Watusis was, they was up there. They were very tall. I saw a film about it. A guy, when he was 10 years old, would be 6 foot something or other, Yeah, they was tall. They was up there. They were, can you imagine a whole tribe? And I guess the shorter people got jealous and killed them off. Anyway, there are signs in nature and signs in the universe that talk about what we should do, whether you may not know it, but this lecture is heavily influenced by the chief. This is, at that time, 81, I was really heavily influenced by the chief. Okay. So, I'm telling people down here on page 3, I guess, that you're never too old, that we want to declare jihad. Jihad on poverty, ignorance, darkness, injustice. And we ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. Family, drugs, fame, women, I don't know whether that's hardship or leadership. Anyway, oh yeah, our leadership have been turning around. That now you got to remember this is 81. So Eldridge Cleaver and them to turn around. Everybody that you could think of, in fact, they probably show up here on the next page, the last page. Huey, Eldridge, congressmen, mayors, educators. This is let everybody know that all the people that we were counting on at that time, this is the end of the rebellion period, and now people are kind of shaking off, and people are voting, and people have hopes in mayors, and you got to remember, there wasn't no black mayors. The first black mayor was back in 60 something. And they had the Black Nationalist Conference in 75. And this is during that period when people are having confidence or hope. They have hope in this environment. So we're saying Huey, Eldridge, congressmen, mayors. I mean, that's during the black mayor explosion. They just, all the cities, black mayors. And the mean thing about it was at that time when white people are now moving back, right? But that's to keep chasing them. When they moved out into the suburbs, that left the city populated by Negroes. So you had a low tax base, and now you got to remember, 81 is at the beginning of the Rust Belt, the decline. This is the year. 80 and 81 was when everything started heading downhill. During this period, I had friends that worked at GM. They made over $20 an hour then. I remember $1980. $20 an hour. They all lived up in the hills in California. When you lived in the hills, you lived in they lived like dope dealers and all of that. And if you see some of the old movies from Detroit, when people worked for GM and all that, remember everybody drove Cadillac. Didn't nobody drive they had just started driving so-called what they call Toyotas and all them old Japanese cars. Just to divert for 1 minute, what happened then with the auto industry, they had designed when you design the thing to where it's no more use after a couple of years.
Designed obsolescence.
Obsolescence, that's the word. Designed you just